I'm Katherine Zock, and I'm mediating this discussion in my role as Vice President and Director of the Friends of the Bargello, a position that I'm enormously proud and in support of one of the most important and deserving museums in the world. This conversation is the fourth installment of Art History in Focus, a London Art Week interim series of online talks, exhibition tours, and theme editorials. Please note that there will be a Q&A session at the end of this discussion, and please feel free to type in your questions to our speakers in advance of the Q&A. And there's a box at the bottom of your screen in which to do this. It's a very great privilege to be joined by this panel on the occasion of this extraordinary exhibition, Donatello, the Renaissance, opening at both Palazzo Strozzi and the Bargello on the 19th of March and running through the 31st of July. Promising to be the cultural event of 2022 in Italy, it marks a major return of Donatello, one of the very greatest Renaissance artists, to his hometown, only the second time in 135 years. The importance of this exhibition within our understanding of the history of art cannot be underestimated. I'll only make a fleeting introduction to our panelists this evening, and I hope I'll be forgiven in the interest of time and all the extensive material that we'd like to cover. Paola D'Agostino is the director of, amazingly, 5 museums in Florence. While the Bargello is the jewel within this 5-pronged crown, the others include the Medici Chapel, or San Michele, Casa Martelli, and Palazzo Davanzati. I think it's fair to say she's a master of multitasking. Arturo Galancino is the hugely effective and innovative director and general manager of the Palazzo Strozzi since 2005. During this time in Florence, Arturo has fearlessly embraced both Renaissance and contemporary exhibitions, encouraging a relevancy and continuity between the two that is becoming synonymous with Florence. Professor Francesco Cagliotti is the curator of the upcoming exhibition on Donatello, as well as the highly acclaimed exhibition on Baroque, held between the same venues in 2019. While Francesco has clearly shown himself as a world-class curator, he is, before anything else, a professor of medieval art history at the Scuola Normale in Pisa and a renowned expert on the Italian Renaissance. Without further delay, I'd like to begin our conversation tonight with a group of questions that initially focuses more on the two directors, Paola and Arturo, before turning this evening over to the exhibition curator, Francesco Cagliotti, when he will be invited to share images related to the exhibition and take us on his own narrative behind the creation and scope of this indelible homage to Donatello. I'll begin with a basic 2-part question that will help set the backdrop for this evening's dialogue. As many of you will already know, this Donatello exhibition signals the second major collaboration between this dream team, I had to say that once at least, between the Bargello, Palazzo Strozzi, and Professor Francesco Cagliotti since 2019. How did this collaboration initially come about? And in what ways do you feel this collaboration has improved the second time round? Paola, I'd like to direct that question first to you as the director of the museum that holds masterpieces of both Verrocchio and Donatello. And we'll start with you, and then we could hear Arturo's thoughts on the same question.
Sure. Thank you, Katherine, and thank you everyone who is attending this talk this afternoon. It is a break from a very intense week of installing masterpieces, and we are all working hard to welcome you on March 19th. When I arrived in Florence in December of 2015, a few weeks afterwards, Arturo invited me to Palazzo Strozzi and told me about the Verrocchio project. It was a very ambitious one, and it was a challenge I think we both embraced with great enthusiasm, especially because the two curators were renowned scholars and also became friends in due course, Francesco Cagliotti and Andrea De Marchi. At the time of the Verrocchio exhibition, the bulk of works was at Palazzo Strozzi, and although Verrocchio has a core of works at the Bargello, a room is devoted to him. The majority of these works had been lent and having been lent to many museums, and it was the case in 2019 when we joined forces also with National Gallery of Art in Washington with a similar, let's say, recipe to what is happening this time with the Berlin museums and with the London partners. The Verrocchio show was very successful, and I think what was a major surprise for the Bargello itself is how people got a new perception, not only of this artist, but of the masterworks that are in the Bargello permanent collection, seen in a different light at Palazzo Strozzi and then in Washington. And the two sections of the exhibition here also demonstrated how vital the other museums, which belongs to the Bargello group or San Michele, was important to fully comprehend that artist as it is to understand Donatello. At the end of the show, the three of us got together, and when they talked about Donatello, I was a bit reluctant at first because it was like we just finished one and now we go on even more ambitious show. But then the more I think I heard about the project from Professor Cagliotti, the more I realized how important this show was and how little the general public knows and appreciates Donatello. And the only way that this could fully happen was to forge again the partnership with Strozzi, which I think we have improved and made even stronger in the sense that we now have been working together for 3 years, and Arturo can correct me, but we have been had rough waters during the health emergency, but somehow we managed to bring together on time a very ambitious show in spite of all the difficulties, and all our lenders have been incredibly generous in keeping the schedule and working with us. And the world of art, I think, and of institution realize how this will be really a once-in-a-lifetime show. So I think after this, we all move on to new project, but we are all aware this is a life-changing experience for us as art historians, as museum directors, and people who had the privilege to be able to do this.
Arturo, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the same.
Yes, Katherine.
Collaboration.
Yeah, I think Paola said already almost everything, I would say, but you're right to use this expression about the dream team, because I really believe that the Bargello and Palazzo Strozzi are a real, true dream team. We were able in these 6-7 years to put together 2 incredible exhibitions. And there are not so many 7 years for the endeavor that we are making with these 2 incredible projects. And so it was a super collaboration. I'm very glad, and we never stopped working in this 7 years. We never stopped working together to put all these things together. Yes, Paola is right. We started with Verrocchio, but I remember when I first spoke with Francesco Cagliotti, also Donatello was one of my dreams. And Francesco said, yes, but let's start with Verrocchio, it's easier. and actually, he was right in a way, because Verrocchio was a groundbreaking show for sure. But Donatello possibly will be even more groundbreaking, is even more ambitious, even more grand and spectacular. And I really look forward that Katherine and you, all the friends of Bargello, the people here connected today with us, will come and see the show, because I'm sure you will really enjoy it. And so, I mean, I have to thank Paola, because without the Bargello, this kind of exhibition will not be possible for us. As you know, we are for sure the leading exhibition space in Italy, but as you know, we don't have a collection, and this kind of exhibition can be possible only if you have a strong core, to start with. And as you said, Katherine, the Bargello is the most important sculpture museum in the world, so it's the best starting point for organizing this kind of exhibition. Then on a personal level, Paola and myself, we get along very well, and we had, I think, also a very good time working in this project. So difficult, but we are driven by the same passion and energy on this kind of project. And of course, we both love and admire Francesco so much that honestly, I can tell you, I learned a lot during this year, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people feel that this collaboration, after having seen the success of Verrocchio and this undoubted success of Donatello, that this is sort of the definitive collaboration, because I think, Verrocchio couldn't have happened the way it happened without Strozzi, but of course, Strozzi could never have done the exhibition without Bargello. And I think even though we haven't seen Donatello yet, I would imagine the same is of course true, and possibly even more so with this exhibition. So I think it's sort of the definitive nature of a successful collaboration, and it's wonderful to see for all of us. It's an incredible legacy that you've all given the world, really, working together like this. Arturo, I have, and I'm sorry to send you another question in quick succession, but I think a lot of people would love to know how you mentally as well as physically can sort of pivot from Jeff Koons into, one of the greatest Renaissance artists in the world, Donatello. How you can do that, and what the purpose of that is. I mean, I think we know, but just to hear from your commitment to this message that you're giving as the director of Strozzi.
Probably Paolo and Francesco would be horrified from what I'm going to say. But for me, it's more or less the same thing, because I mean, under the organization point of view, we are talking about these two huge projects. Both Jeff and Donatello show are a very ambitious project. In a way, both groundbreaking. Of course, we are talking about completely different products, but from my point of view, my mission is to bring to Florence very important cultural events, international events, and events never done before in Italy, possibly. And this is both the case of Jeff and Donatello. And I think what we have done so far with contemporary art was really a game changer in Italy, because we started this impressive record of contemporary art exhibition, and we had so much success. We changed the identity of Florence, that now became, in the last 5 or 6 years, thanks to Strozzi, the place where the most important contemporary art exhibition happened. And this was not easy. When we started thinking about that, everybody thought we were crazy. But since the beginning, we showed that Florence had a strong contemporary potential. And then talking about Donatello, I think in a city like that, with collection like the collection of the Bargello, of the Uffizi, we are surrounded by so many incredible treasures. And if we have to do an exhibition on a big exhibition on Renaissance art, this should be fantastic, spectacular, unique. So again, this is the case of Donatello. This is the reason why we try to focus on Old Master show more or less every 3 years, more like 2.5, 3 years, because we will not be able to do this kind of exhibitions of Old Master every year. You know what I mean? Because it takes a lot of time. We need to create collaboration, and it's very complicated, and it would not be possible to do this kind of show every year, because we don't have so many topics in this sense, yeah, so I see that there is a strong continuity between the contemporary art program and the Old Master program of Palazzo Strozzi.
Thank you. Thank you, Arturo. It's been an incredible contribution that Palazzo Strozzi, with you at the helm, has made in that regard, for sure. Paola, I wanted to ask you, obviously you've inherited an incredible, collection and an incredible history to Donatello, considering the first, well, in fact, it was the second exhibition after the Bargello became a museum in 1887 dedicated to Donatello. What an incredible legacy that you are continuing by, staging now the second. How does that feel for you? And what do you feel, how do you feel that this exhibition, and this will obviously is a question that will be continued by Francesco Cagliotti, soon after, but how do you feel this exhibition will continue this legacy of Donatello at the Bargello, often referred to as the Casa di Donatello? How do you feel this will continue that legacy?
I think that, in a way, I know it may sound shocking, but this is the first real exhibition, as we perceive exhibitions nowadays, held at the Bargello. You can see here a rare photograph that comes from the Bargello Photographic Archive of the Salone di Donatello in 1887. At the time, it was a pioneering exhibition showing mainly the works by Donatello that were already housed at the Bargello with a few loans, together with a series of plaster casts, life-size, of the major monuments that Donatello produced throughout his life and throughout Italy. So it was a combination of original works of art and copies in cast. And at the time, it was something that the public would not see as an odd combination. As you know, those were the years where many major museums had plaster cast collections or were asking for plaster cast copies to house in their museum's collection. But there was not a huge effort to bring together originals and compare and contrast different stories and different moments of the artist's career. As you can see in this slide, the pedestals of the bronze David or the Marzocco are different. You can spot the marble David in the background, but that exhibition was also the beginning of the new life of the Bargello itself. In fact, the Donatello room was named after the Salone di Donatello after the show, and it was then that it was decided that the core room of the museum would be entitled to Donatello and would have his masterpieces surrounded by works by his contemporaries or artists that were inspired by him. Almost a century later, there was the second show, Omaggio a Donatello, curated by Professor Paola Barocchi, together with then a young team of museum curators and scholars, and Giovanna Gaeta Bertela, who was the director of the Bargello. But again, it was focused on the Bargello works of art of the permanent collection, with the in-depth study of their history, their copies, their fortune. So it was very much focused on collection history rather than, and presenting this collection history to the public, rather than having an exhibition for the public with the juxtaposition of works from the permanent collection together with loans from other museums. And I think this is very important to bear in mind when visitors will visit both the Strozzi venue and the Bargello, because the other two shows, which came in 1986, were done ironically in the US, in Detroit and at Fort Worth. And I think we are all very grateful to Alan Dar, because he generously is lending to this show a work that comes from Detroit that was not lent on the occasion of the Italian Renaissance sculpture in the time of Donatello, but the Italian part was held at Forte del Belvedere, so a different venue, and again, more of an exhibition venue in the Strozzi style. So I know that have been in a way very demanding, both from Arturo and Francesco, in asking them not only to have, like Verrocchio, part of the show in the temporary rooms, but to change temporarily the Donatello room. And this is something that personally I find very scary, but also very inspiring, because that room has basically been untouched since 1919 with few additions, but no one has dared to approach that room and to install in that room works that will come from other lenders. And at the same time, some of the works that have always been in that room since the late 19th century, and one example is the Marble David, which is a youthful work by Donatello, will be moved in over 140 years to Palazzo Strozzi, and it will be the work that welcomes visitors to Strozzi. So in a way, it's truly one show in two venues. And I hope that after that, Donatello will not only have a new recognition by the general public, but the Bargello itself will be perceived not only as the house of Donatello, but as a leading museum in display and study of sculpture, both in the permanent collection and in the temporary exhibitions.
Thank you, Paola. I have no doubt that that will be achieved. It's just knowing what I know already of the scope of the exhibition. I'm certain this will happen. I think it was kind of you to thank, Alan Darr and the DIA for their generous loan, and there were so many unbelievable loans to this exhibition, which Francesco will speak about momentarily, and which will really set this exhibition above potentially any that has come before and potentially after for at least a lifetime. I just want to very briefly single out the generosity of the Boston Museum of Fine Art, who are loaning their Madonna of the Clouds. It was an incredibly collaborative and unselfish loan for them to make, partly in due, I'm sure, to the magnificent team in place for this exhibition. But they will be reopening their newly installed Renaissance galleries without their Donatello, which will be, on view in Italy. So an incredibly generous loan, and shows how important this exhibition is. So I think, being very conscious of the time and everyone wanting, of course, to hear from Francesco Cagliotti, his ideas and purposes and scope of this exhibition, I'd love to turn, he'll be sharing his screen now, which he actually already is, but he'll be sharing a slideshow with us and talking us through his designs of the exhibition. So thank you, Francesco. We all look forward to hearing from you.
So I can, good evening to everybody, and thank you. I can directly go in the show, if you want, saying with you some pieces. The exhibition is huge, is very ambitious, as you already know, more than 120 or 30 items distributed between Strozzi in the first place and the Bargello in the second place. And it is divided in 14 sections. The first 11 sections are in Strozzi, and 3 last in the Bargello, beginning through and with the Salone of Donatello. So in spite of these enormous size, we evidently decided already at the very beginning of this story of cutting Donatello's corpus, Donatello's oeuvre, for the sake of simplicity and clarity, because Donatello is, as you know, I suppose, I hope, a sculpture which lived 80 years, working every day of his life continuously without a pause until the end of his life. Although we know from Vasari that he was very still at the end of his life experience in the last years. So he distributed throughout Italy many works of monumental size. Donatello is primarily a monumental sculpture, so it is very difficult, it's very challenging for everybody to think a presentation, a temporary presentation of his oeuvre. This explains why until now we had only 3 exhibitions, and the first, as Paula reminded us, principally of plaster casts. The second one in the Bargello concentrated only on the Bargello's masterworks, and the third one between Detroit, Fort Worth, and Forte del Belvedere, principally devoted to Donatello's contemporary sculptures and followers. Compared to our venue, they had few true Donatello items. So all this considered, we had to made a choice very rigorous and very complicated by the fact that we wanted to present not only Donatello but his world, which is a 2-century world, or at least a 2-century world. Donatello was, in my opinion, not simply the father of the Quattrocento, of the early Renaissance, with Brunelleschi, as one reads usually in the in literature, but a very revolutionary artist who changed completely our sense, our vision of art, influencing as well the Quattrocento as the Cinquecento, at least, I repeat. And my continuous focus is on the fact that although he had many pupils and followers in sculpture and in painting, which copied and replicated and imitated his masterworks and his ideas, they were, with the glorious exception of Mantegna, not so intelligent and profound as the great masters of the high Renaissance, of the Cinquecento. Practically speaking, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, Pontormo, Rosso, Bandinelli, Cellini, Jacopo Sansovino understood more of Donatello than Agostino di Duccio or Pagno di Lapo Portigiani or the same Desiderio da Settignano and so on, because they were so close to Donatello prototypes that they didn't see how profoundly Donatello had changed their world. So they loved, they understood the Spiritelli, the revival of ancient world, the coming back to naturalistic ornamentation, everything which was in some sense superficial, the superficial of this world. But Donatello had changed the relationship between works and space, between spurious world and real world, between space and time. And these things arrived at a mature realization, not as a first step with Donatello, and in second place, I repeat, beginning with Leonardo and passing through Michelangelo, Raphael, and so on. So the exhibition will span from the early works by Donatello between the third and the second decade of the Quattrocento until the Vasari era, the Vasari period. Better, we arrive in the Bargello at the very end of the exhibition, at the very beginning of the 17th century, with a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi, which in my opinion is still depending on a marble Virgin by Donatello in the Viennese, the so-called Dudley Madonna. So, because it's impossible to present all the exhibition to you this evening, we decided to select half dozen of examples, following the chronology, evidently, because in the Palazzo Strozzi, in the first 11 sections, you will find Donatello from the beginning until his death. And then in the Bargello, some very important masterworks by him, which couldn't move outside the museum, as the Bronze David or the marble St. George from Orsa Michele or the Macigno stone Marzocco, but also other masterworks from outside, from many parts of Europe or the US, the Boston Madonna of the Clouds, as you reminded. They are outside the chronology of Donatello for the sake of showing their direct relationships with Cinquecento masters who looked at them. So let me show some samples of our selection. You can find in the first room or in the first section of the Strozzi part the celebrated pair of crucifixes by the young Donatello and Brunelleschi. They are the protagonists of a very famous novel which put against each other the two friends. In my opinion, although Donatello was a pupil of Ghiberti in the as a goldsmith, and a pupil of the masters of the Florence Cathedral in the field of marble sculpture, the real master of Donatello was Brunelleschi. He was no more than 10 years older than him, but this difference was capital, was crucial for Donatello knowledge, Donatello beginning, Donatello debut. So in the third and fourth section of the Strozzi show, you will find extraordinarily 3 bronze elements among the 17 from the baptismal font in Siena. They had never quitted their original and historical space, and we had the chance of collaborating with the Opificio delle Pietredure in Florence and the owner, evidently, in Siena, the cathedral, which are developing a conservation program, the restoration of the marble part directly in the baptistry, and the restoration of the bronze parts in the middle, in the center of Florence, in the site of Via degli Alfani. So during this campaign, we can present 3 pieces. As you can see, the banquet of Herod already conservated, already cleaned brilliantly by them with the statue of hope. Whilst the faith figure is still waiting for restoration. So you can compare the extraordinary virtues, not only as status, but also as capacities on the part of the Florentine conservators. Then another exceptional and unique, absolutely unique loan from the Cathedral of Prato, 3 elements from the marble and bronze pulpits constructed by Donatello and Michelozzo between the 20s and the 30s. This is one scene of Spiritelli, which evidently you can we can find in Strozzi in the section 6 of the exhibition. And then in a sort of escalation of beauty and exceptionality, the San Lorenzo doors from the old sacristy, the Medicean old sacristies. Also in this case, a conservation program done by the Opificio delle Petredure together with the Opera Medicia Laurenziana. You will see that the 2 bronze leaves on the left are already cleaned, whilst the other leaves are waiting for exhibition, for conservation, sorry. So we can show them in the middle of this process. And this is perhaps Arturo and Paola can confirm the most difficult of all loans, because Donatello's bronzes for Padua have never left the Veneto region. There is an exception for Brescia, which is, as you know, in Lombardy, so very close to Padua, but they have never visited the place of origin of their author. So we still hope to obtain in the next hours the Crucifix and the Imago Pietatis and one among the 4 miracles of St. Anthony. The Crucifix, one should remember, was not an original part of the high altar of the Basilica. It was done for the rod screen between the nave and the presbytery, but in 1895 it was put together with a high altar, and until now this is the situation. And going beyond Strozzi, in the Bargello, we can meet these highlights of Donatello's production compared with some episodes of fortune, as I anticipated. So in the Donatello Salone, you can see, among many other things, the San George and the bronze David, together with the 2 detached frescoes by Andrea del Castagno from the Villa Carducci at Legnaia, owned by the Uffizi in Florence, because Andrea del Castagno is one of the most fanatic painters linked to Donatello. So in the Pippo Spano, you can see an echo of the St. George, as well as in the Farinata degli Uberti, you can see an echo of the bronze David. Be careful of the bronze David in his original presentation, in his original position, which means very high, more than 2 meters high. But at the end of the 16th century, the base sculpted, invented, projected by Donatello, sculpted initially by Donatello, and then enlarged by Desiderio da Settignano for the placement of the statue from the so-called old house of the Medici in Via Larga in the middle of Florence to the Michelozzo palace, which we see still. So this high base went lost. So Paola can tell you how difficult it is in the today museology find a solution, a right solution, a good solution, which can put together the present and the history of the object. And in the first of the temporary rooms of the Bargello, you can find, as I anticipated, the Madonna of the Clouds and the Madonna of the Humility in bronze from Vienna, enclosed in a marble tabernacle done, in my opinion, by the young Verrocchio as the last pupil of Donatello, perhaps the very, very last pupil between the 15 and the 60s, together with a double sheet of Berrughete, which doesn't need comments on my part, because you can immediately realize the sense of the comparison. And these kind of comparisons obtains in the last room of the show a particular celebration, because as it happens, the Madonna Dudley, the Dudley Madonna in DDNA, sculpted by Donatello around 1440. We don't know for what patron, but obtained at the very end of the same century by the patrician, the Florentine patrician Piero del Pugliese, and enclosed in a wooden tabernacle painted by the young Fra Bartolomeo, which was not yet a Dominican friar. This Madonna, following my a bit fanatic research over the last 30 years, was admired and copied and imitated by legions, really legions of artists. Please note that the majority of Florentine sculpted Madonnas of the Renaissance were diffused through cast replicas, thanks to the terracotta and stucco technique, and they were diffused for devotional reasons. Whilst in this case, we have a fortune which ran quite constantly in the field of artists, the great artists you can imagine. So from Donatello to Desiderio, from Leonardo to Signorelli, and Michelangelo, Raphael, Rosso, Pontormo, Bronzino, we arrive, as I anticipated before, until the Gentileschi, father and daughter. But having to cut our stuff, we selected only an Artemisia example from the Uffizi. So this is in a very fast and I hope not so confused way the sense of the visit, which evidently contains much more.
Thank you, Francesco.
For your time.
it's an incredible privilege to hear from you the outlines of this exhibition, and I know that there's so much more within it, but I can feel an incredible commitment from you in this exhibition to building a visual context that I think we've probably never had for Donatello before, between Palazzo Strozzi and the Bargello. I think this opportunity for visitors to compare and contrast this extraordinary influence. I think so often we think of Donatello in or maybe not everyone, but there's a temptation to think of him in isolation because he's so far and beyond most. And I think this is an incredible opportunity to see him in this context that you've built, and obviously exacerbated by all the generosity of the loans. And I know that you've an extraordinary number of loans and could never have produced this context without those loans. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing this, as I'm sure everyone is. I have my own question for you that I think others would be interested in hearing. What is your, if you had to think of, what do you want your audience to take away from this exhibition that is maybe different from what we all know about Donatello and his, the first sculpture in the round since antiquity and the vanishing point, and the two sort of contributions that we all, or most of us, seem to associate with Donatello? What other sort of visceral thing do you want your audience to go away from this exhibition having seen and felt?
Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to answer. It was a real daring, operation on our part. I repeat, because Donatello is essentially a monumental sculpture. I love to say an architect. As well as Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi is an architect of built spaces. He rebuilt spaces through his figure, his statues, his sculptures, obliging, soliciting his public to rethink to the historical spaces they lived through his eruption, through marble, through bronze, through bronzes in the environment. Donatello, if I can add this thought, Donatello evidently didn't discover the art, but in my opinion, he discovered art history practically, because he is the first great master in Western tradition, which saw really billions of images putting them together in a new vision of the world, to link Donatello to the classical world, to the Roman, to the Greek Roman, to the ancient world, is to simplify too much, because Donatello was an admirer of Middle Ages as well of antiquity, also because, as we know, he was unable to distinguish in a philological way the classical world and the Middle Ages. He could only distinguish between pagan and Christian art. This is evident, but not much more. So Carolingian ivories and Octonian ivories and Octonian miniatures, one discovered that some of them were known to Donatello and put together into a new vision of art. I hope that the exhibition could show also this in the contrast between Donatello and his followers, because his followers, I repeat, the 400 followers, no matter how important and great and skillful they where they are, Masaccio, Filippo Lippi, Mantegna, Marco Zoppo, never arrived at his level, with, I repeat, the exception of Mantegna, because Mantegna was able to capture some new elements in Donatello's narrative, in Donatello's spatial presentation, which one can say anticipated photography, the cinema. There is a jewel, a bronze jewel from the Louvre, which we installed this morning, the Courtauld Calvary, which, because it was too clean one century ago as Middeldorf in 1955, noticed perfectly, has been not so well understood by our colleagues, but it is a shock. It is a peak of geniality in the relationship between space and time and different levels of historical action, because you see the mourners in the first plan, and in a sort of I don't know how to say this in the English terminology for photography or cinema, in a sort of back plan which obscured them. You have the soldiers, which stay there tired, without realizing that in that precise moment the apex of Christian history is developing in front of them, but they don't understand it, they don't follow it. So better than every sentence in if I may, in the sacred scriptures, in the Gospels, you can perfectly understand these, which is for me still now, after many years, an emotional experience, very, very, very strong. So I hope that that I'm sure that the friends of the Bargello and the other participants of this evening could have the time to put together all these, because the exhibition between Strozzi and Bargello really offers many, many, many things on to reflect on, to consider on.
Yes, certainly, and I think you know, a major contribution, of course, of Donatello is this connection of human nature with the divine and with the unseen. And I think his narrations are exquisite in their composition for that reason. It sounds, Arturo and Paola, as though there were a few risks maybe taken now that we know we're going to see the David 2 meters, Donatello's David 2 meters high. It sounds like it's been a collaboration of creating a correct and academic, you know, exposure to Donatello as he wanted to be seen. And I think that's a lot of credit to the two of you for sort of permitting that perfect atmosphere for this collaboration and this communication to happen between all these Donatellos. I think that's must have been a big decision for you, Paola, to reinstall Donatello's David.
Yes, It was, and it will actually be slightly lower than it was originally, or it has been reconstructed. And this was, as Francesco knows, and as the designer of the show, Gigi Cuccolini, and together with the curators and conservators, with Ilaria Ciseri and other people on the Bargello staff, we have been really working hard several months to find the perfect height. And in the end, there was the compromise because of static reasons to raise it, but not to the original height, or what Francesco thinks was the original height. And this is really the struggle between, you know, displaying statues out of their original context is much more difficult than paintings, because paintings, of course, had lighting sources, but they don't have all the perspective changes that sculpture, and especially statuary, has. And as Francesco has brilliantly demonstrated, the moment you move even a few centimeters, Donatello works more than other sculptors' works. The only one I can think of which in a way bears the same comparison, and I'm sure Francesco can correct me, would be Bernini. And not because I am a Baroque expert, just because they really taught the statue in a specific point of view and with a specific architecture set. So in a way, I think we all thrive, and Arturo as well as Strozzi, to give the most ambitious combination between museum display and giving justice to this amazing statuary and works of art. And I expect people, when they visit the Donatello room, to be puzzled at the beginning, because they will see, in a way, a covered piazza transformed into two rooms, one with a temporary collection, one with a temporary exhibition, and then surrounded by the permanent collection. So Donatello will be still in dialogue with Luca della Robbia, Agostino di Duccio, Ghiberti, Brunelleschi, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, it will be a dramatic change. And I think in a way is the sort of like step-by-step attitude towards the bronze David, because it's such a unique and iconic work that we have to live with it as a statue, slightly raised, to see how we live with it in a museum setting.
And Arturo, were there any challenges with installations at Palazzo Strozzi? I mean, obviously there's less you need to contend with in terms of incumbents, because the space is so inviting, but were there challenges there too?
Well, I think we are trying to present the work in really a new light, under a new gaze. Sometimes this gaze could look bold, like, you know, having the David so high, but actually at the end of the day, is more true, is philological. Yeah. You know, that is more correct in a way. So this is probably the correct way to display this kind of art. So in the display of Strozzi is very clean. We like to give, of course, the stage, to leave the stage to Donatello's style, grand style. We have very important and big statues too. You know, Francesco mentioned the marble David from the Bargello, the two big crucifix from Santa Croce and Santa Maria Novella. We are also going to have important bronzes such as the Attis, the San Giovanni Martelli. So we have big statues. We have many challenges also in Strozzi. And then we would like to mention also the big altarpiece from Ferrara. This is an incredible endeavor. You will see this Baroncelli altarpiece. We are talking about 5 giant bronze statues. You know, I would say they are 2.5 meters tall. So now we had, you know, many, let's say, installation issues, because, you know, you have to remember that Palazzo Strozzi is a 15th century building. It's not easy to take these works inside our space. But we do that every time. We always invent very creative system to make this kind of display possible.
I have some questions to cover here just at the end, and I apologize for going a bit over, but there are some interesting questions that I think people would be interested in hearing your comments are. One is, of course, and there hasn't been mention given the confines of the current conversation, but of the other two locations for the collaborative Donatello exhibitions in Berlin and London. Francesco, did you want to mention, one of the questions is specifically what are the sort of differences between the loans from Florence versus the other two locations? And I know if you can answer that, fairly quickly, only because of the time, and I know that maybe some of that answer you may not be able to answer, but if you can elaborate. My understanding is that most of the extensive loans are in Florence. But
evidently, we were obliged to differentiate many loans because not every owner could lend a single work over 1 year and a half. So there is a bulk of shared loans, which are evidently those with a provenance from the Bargello, the London Victoria and Albert Museum, and Berlin, although not everything could travel evidently. For example, the Ascension in marble by Donatello in the V&A, it will remain there, or the Bronze David, the St. George from Or San Michele are obliged to remain there. And the majority of public owned works, original works by Donatello in bronze, for example, from Siena, from Siena, or from Ferrara, in relationship with his direct pupil Baroncelli, will remain in Italy. As can be seen only in Italy. Other important loans from Prato and Padua, we hope can travel also to Berlin and to London. And if I may say this, we have worked a lot also for our colleagues from Berlin and London in diplomacy with Siena, with Prato, and we with Padua and so on. Whilst the Florence venue is as a chronological presentation, a quite rigorously chronological presentation, with exceptions I anticipated for the Salone di Donatello in the Bargello. In Berlin and in London, they will approach a typological cut, an iconographical point of view, because they will have many other works which we have not, evidently, taken in particular in Berlin from their public collections. The Berlin show will take place in the Gemälde-Galerie, arriving from the Bode Museum, evidently, but through a very interesting combination of paintings, drawings, and sculpture also then. So the ratio is a bit shared, because they, if I may, if I well understood, were inspired in some way by our project, Florentine project. So the combination of paintings, sculptures, and drawings to put Donatello in the very middle of the Renaissance. But you you will see different voices, which is very important, different paths, different points of view. I don't know, I don't remember, Paula, how many shared works, shared alone do we have? 40, 45, yes, about 45, which is a third of the Florence venue.
Okay, that's interesting. That's helpful to the various questions that follow the same sort of line. I just want to ask one more question because then we're sort of out of time. But this is, I find this very interesting too for you, Francesco. What do you think Donatello's most important or original work is within his known oeuvre? Is it either relief or statuary, in your opinion?
Very difficult to answer.
I know.
Because I'm captured by difficulty in general, difficulties which explain why I do research more on sculpture than on painting. I would say a statue, because Donatello was a genius of perspective, not only in historical reliefs, but also, and I will say in particular in statuary, it is very easy to explain Donatello's perspective in literature through photography, presenting reliefs, the St. George with the dragon, the Banquet of Herod, which are masterworks. But the more and more I study Donatello, I have at least the illusion to understand how he was particular in the forming his statues, considering the point of view, the original point of view. So if one put together a survived statue by Donatello and the historical context, one understands why Donatello's contemporaries, for example, humanists like Cristoforo Landino, wrote that he was a master of movement, he was a master of life. Because Donatello was the best in sculpture, he realized immediately, already as a young master, the limits of sculpture compared to painting, because painting has a space, has a landscape, has a variety of colors, and sculpture has very few advantages compared to painting. So Donatello arrived to destroy the limits of sculpture, offering at the end of the day great models, not only for sculptures, but especially for painters, because his solutions were easier to apply, to follow in painting. Very, very skillful master as Agostino di Duccio, Desiderio da Settignano, Mino da Fiesole, they were sometimes better than Donatello in the from a technical point of view, but when they're unable to embrace the vastity of space that Donatello owned as a visionary presence in the world, of his times and in the world of history. This is important. This capacity of embracing, I'm shocked by this, almost everything.
Thank you. Thank you. We're all very excited to see the catalog, which I know relatively firsthand is going to be extraordinary and will be, you know, authoritative text on Donatello, I'm sure, for many years to come. So I'm sure everyone is very excited to see that too. We are out of time. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in tonight and listened to us. And I hope as many of you as possible can come to Florence to see the exhibition. It's been an incredible honor to speak with the three of you tonight on this really once in a lifetime project. And I think we're all grateful to the three of you for your commitment to the Renaissance and to those artists who really are responsible for shaping the artistic language that we all think we know and understand from then to current day. So thank you for that commitment and for answering questions and speaking with us tonight. Before I end, I have to make an announcement for the London Art Week platform that that this is the, they have it listed here, in fact, but that they invite you to subscribe to their newsletter and their website for the latest news. And tomorrow, make sure to register and join tomorrow's talk, which is another within this Art History in Focus series. And I want to take this moment again to thank you all for attending tonight. We all look very much forward to this exhibition. Thank you to all three of you.